Perfect. Baboon. So, hello everybody. Welcome to class. I hope everybody enjoyed not being in class since the last class. But I also hope you enjoy being in class. So, we are now talking about our next topic. We are talking about RESTful APIs, what they are, how to set one up, and lots of other fun things. So, any questions about anything before we get started? No? Okay. So, cloud computing, then. Definitely a buzzword that's been passed around a lot lately. Does anybody have any idea what cloud computing is? Yes?
It's when you outsource the function of your computer to some other device in some factory, probably. Not a factory, but like a warehouse.
Like a server farm.
Yeah, server farm.
Outsourcing the actual execution of code to some remote service. A pretty good example, if you wanted an example, does anybody remember Google Stadia? It was a thing that Google tried a few years ago. The idea was that you would have video games running on Google's big server farm, and you would send inputs to the games using, the client, but it was basically a client-server interface. So you would be playing, your Call of Duty game, or, Crysis 2, or something else you didn't have. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it flopped. I think they sort of kept it around for a while. I think they might still. Did they kill it? They might have killed it.
It's dead in the eyes of people who play games.
Well, I mean, for any serious gamer, it was never a question of whether it would work in the first place. These are like, the serious gamer doesn't like the lag introduced by having a wireless controller. Let alone sending your gosh darned inputs all the way to frigging Google to be processed and have the internet have latency. That's just what you want is, you want your game's execution to be dependent on, the lag from the internet. Fantastic idea. But anyway, so that's basically the idea, is you had Crysis 2 running on Google's servers, heating up Google's machines, and then you would just have a front-end interface to that. That particular one didn't take off because of latency. Lots and lots of people, companies like the idea of cloud computing because it moves them to a subscription model, right? Rather than paying for a discrete piece of software and a one-time transaction that you install on your own piece of machinery, they now offer a quote-unquote service, which they get to charge a monthly fee for. This is largely the direction that Microsoft Office has been moving over the last number of years, and the reason for the upsurgence in the popularity of open source alternatives. Even if it's a small surge, it's still a surge. Surge might be overstating it. I think that most people would use it if they knew it was free. Anyway, so today we are going to discuss some of the technologies which form that quote-unquote API. So the term API is so general to be almost meaningless, but when people use the term API, setting up an API, using X's API, what they are generally referring to is a remote API. They're talking about what we are going to be talking about in class today. So, you know, the term API covers everything from, you know, the methods which you attach to an object in Java all the way up to, you know, this. So, cloud computing is a new name for an idea that dates back to the dawn of computer networking in the 1960s. The idea is that sometimes a program running on a client machine needs to access computing power, code, or stored data on a server machine. And it's useful to be able to ask that server machine to run some code, perform some computations, or retrieve and update your data through a remote API, or Application Programming Interface. Any questions so far? Remote APIs have been standardized in many ways over the years and form the basis of cloud computing. Cloud computing services that define their API using HTTP requests and responses are known as web services. And by far the most popular web service standard is REST, Representational State Transfer. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. So we are going to be talking about REST and RESTful APIs. By the end of this, you may not think they are quite so RESTful. They might be RESTful. I know, it was a terrible pun, but I'm standing by that pun. So, many web services offer exposed APIs which allow you to access various pieces of information. You remember, does anybody remember Pokemon Go?
Yes.
Does anybody still play Pokemon Go?
My wife
A little bit?
Still have on my phone but don't play.
Yeah. I think Pokemon Go, in the same way as the Pokemon games, just like kind of stepped away from its core audience the moment they introduced more than 150 Pokemon. But you know, so it goes. The thing that makes that game work is an API, right? Pokemon Go is accessing the Google Maps API, right? That's actually where things like the locations of Pokestops. Am I speaking gibberish to people? No? Is this like a sufficiently common cultural touchstone that everybody knows what I mean when I say Pokestop? Anybody not know what a Pokestop is? Okay, good. So, you don't suppose that some programmer at whatever the company's name is, I forgot, Niantic or something. You don't suppose somebody at that company is going through the entire globe putting down Pokestops, right? Probably not. No. Jim's being the same thing. What it's doing is it's harvesting locations of interest which have been specified on Google Maps. So like the database of Pokestop locations and gym locations is derived from the Google Maps API. And as soon as people sort of started figuring out that that's what was happening, people started like taking photos at locations, which increase, like if you have a certain number of photos at a location, that makes it like a point of interest on the Maps API. So like Pokestops started like popping up all over the place, you know, just because it was much more convenient for the game for that to be the case. But anyway, so yeah, that's why like things like churches and fire stations ended up being gyms and Pokestops and stuff. But anyway, the XFKA Twitter has an exposed interface. Discord has an exposed API interface. These allow developers to create bots that read, update, delete, and post messages on both services. OpenAI has an API which allows developers to train and run massive generative neural networks in response to custom data prompts. And of course, you have the ever venerable Amazon Web Services, which offers a very large variety of cloud-based computing services available over the web via RESTful APIs at very reasonable prices. Yes?
When you have something like Discord or certain games will have them as well, and you have both public and private accessibility on the APIs, do they make separate APIs for those, or can they put restrictions on them?
Well, I don't think it would be necessary to, so what I think your question is like, you can subscribe to different tiers for an API, right?
Sort of like, for example, some video games have like APIs that can like access stats, like game stats,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them will be like publicly accessible, whereas other ones are not accessible to just your normal, like, developer.
Yeah. I mean,
Like, would those be the same API with just permissions, or?
yeah, the way that I can't speak to how any particular company has set anything up, but it's not necessary to have two different APIs. Like, for one thing, you can't really control whether the client is, like, imagine you have, like, standard and advanced APIs, right? You can't actually prevent a client from using the wrong API, right? Someone who is not subscribed to your enterprise level API can still, send HTTP packets to it.
They just won't be able to.
Right. So the validation there would be secondary to that. The HTTP request, in order to use the API correctly, it'll check credentials which would be sent to the packet, right? Yes. So it's useful for a moment to consider, like, take a look at what Twitter/X produces as an API.
Wait, this is on the Twitter platform?
This is developer.twitter.com/endocs Twitter-API. So yes, this is the Twitter API. You can do this. You can totally do this.
It's just funny that they haven't changed the Twitter name, but they're still going based on that.
Well, apparently our good friend Mr. Musk cannot simply snap his fingers and order the universe according to his own will, as he seems to believe. It does actually take time to do stuff. Plus, I think, like, most people still call Twitter Twitter, but most people still call Facebook Facebook and not Meta, which is a name that Zuckerberg stole, by the way.
Yeah, and also Meta is dying because it's literally just VRChat but worse.
Yes, somehow, yeah.
And there's only one type of profitable job on there somehow.
Oh, and let me guess what that is. Yeah.
Would you like to guess?
So it's probably the only profitable job on Twitch as well.
Probably.
So you'll notice that you have accesses to different tier levels based on giving this company money, right? They will do things like rate limit how many tweets you can tweet through the API. They'll, various other things, access to the ads API. You kind of have your basic intro free level to see what you can do with it, and then if you want to do anything serious with it, you're going to have to start giving them money. You also have, like, basic plan. You can see this increases this doubles the number of tweets you can tweet per month. at the user level, costs $100 a month. The pro level, you can tweet 1 million tweets per month. Why would you need to tweet 1 million tweets per month? Like, there are only like 30 days in a month. How many tweets is that?
It's just in case if someone needs more than 3,000, they just gotta bump it up extra.
Yes. So, 1 million tweets divide by 30 days. So 33,000 tweets a day divided by 24 hours. So 1,388 tweets per hour. I think tweets per hour, we should have like a speedometer, you know? Divided by 60.
Would
That's
these have rate limiters?
23 tweets per minute divided by 60. That is, okay, so one tweet about every 3 seconds on the pro tier. I know I would unsubscribe.
Wouldn't this most likely have a rate limit though?
I mean,
Like,
if they say 1 million tweets per month, this is the least amount of clustering possible under that rubric and still making like 1 million tweets a month, right?
1 million tweets per month, 300,000 tweets per month posted on
At the app level. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you can retrieve 1 million, you can post 300, yes, pardon me, yeah.
that's a lot.
That's a bit much. Yes. And then if you need more than that, they have monthly subscription tiers. So, yeah. You'll notice though that until you pay for the pro package, which is $5,000 a month, it doesn't look like the other ones let you get like retrieve tweets. They've been locking down these types of things across a lot of apps lately because basically what's been going on the internet over the last few months is like people are just losing their mind over AI, right? So what they're doing is a massive data harvesting campaign, which is overloading many of the servers of many of these types of social media things where lots and lots of people post data for some reason. So like a lot of places have started locking down their sites. Like you'll notice on Twitter, I think they recently locked it down so you can't view tweets unless you're logged into Twitter or something like that. But anyway, so that's what this is what the company is trying to sell you. The API is a product, right? They're trying to make money off of it. So, let's talk about REST, the RESTful API. The most important thing to know about REST, right off the bat, is that it actually uses HTTP response types properly, right? Up to now, the difference between a GET and a POST request, for us, has been primarily, is the data encoded or not? Is the data encrypted in the payload, or is it freely open and available to everything, to everyone, to view in the packet header, right? Which one's which? Post is encrypted, GET, the parameters are in the URL. Okay. So, the trick is, there are a lot more different types of request packets than this. Each of them has an associated function. However, you'll notice that we don't have superglobals in PHP for all of them. So we need some way of transmitting parameters to PHP scripts without using GET request query parameters and without using the encrypted payload of the packet in a post request. This is basically the problem we're solving right now. But for the time being, let me just jump ahead a little bit, because I'd like to go through this. So, if we think about REST in the context of a database application, which, you know, we just did databases, it's like what we're doing in the course, right? Each of these 4 HTTP request packet types has a corresponding SQL operation and a correct semantic interpretation. A GET request is a request to retrieve information. I am querying the database using a select command, right? I wish to select some data out of the database. In the context of Twitter/X, a GET request would be viewing your feed, right? Post request adds new information to the database. Corresponding SQL command is insert. In the context of Twitter, what would this be? Yes, it would be tweeting a tweet or Xing an X, I suppose. Put. How many people have seen put before? So this is a new one for a lot of you. The put request packet type is a request to update existing information. It corresponds to an update operation. So we are not inserting new data into the database, we are updating data that already exists in the database. In the context of Twitter, what would a put operation be? Let's see if someone else has one. Anybody? Yes?
Editing a tweet or something, or profile, I don't know, I don't use Twitter.
Sure, updating your profile would be, you know, that'd be one. Editing a tweet wasn't previously possible, but yes.
I would say it just depends on which thing you go to with the API.
Yes. So I would say liking a tweet would be updating that tweet's entry in the database, right? You're not creating new data, but you're also not retrieving data. You are putting a like into the database and updating it. Make sense? Yes?
Yeah, you said putting into, would that not be an insert, would you not be adding something to the post rather than modifying it?
So, without having a very fine-grained view of the internal database structure of Twitter, I imagine the way that it's been formulated, right? You have the tweet body itself, right, which is 128 characters, unless that's been changed. Then you would also have a, you know, I would imagine you'd have a database entry pre-made for likes and number of shares, and probably something that's linking to like the tweets that are replies to this tweet in the database, right? You'd have some sort of cross-reference. Or no. The tweets that are the replies would indicate what they are the reply of, because each tweet is only the reply of one other tweet. Each tweet can reply to at most one. Each tweet can reply to at most one tweet, but a tweet can be replied to an unbounded number of times. So you don't want like an unbounded array inside of a database entry. So you put that data into, you put that on the tweet which is the reply rather than the tweet which is being replied to, right? So these are the types of categories that you would have pre-established, right? It is true that you are, you know, in a sense, inserting some data, right?
Likes also store who liked you, right? So there's more than just the amount. That's what I was kind of thinking. Is
Yeah. Okay, well, I didn't actually know that. Okay.
I'll enter it.
yeah.
Yeah.
You put and you update the number of likes, but then it also stores the name or whatever.
Okay, in my head canon, where there's a simpler version of the universe and likes is just a number attached to a post, that would be a pure update function. Obviously, these things get a little bit more like, as the complexity of the software grows, these categories break down a little bit, right? For example, our next one, it's quite self-explanatory. Delete. Does delete actually delete? That's a good question, right? Does it delete for you? Does it just hide the tweet, right? Does it hide it so that a record of it is kept so that the government can look at your tweets, all of your tweets before you deleted any? Good questions. No, you don't think so?
Well, it's like when they say, be careful what you post on social media like Instagram and Facebook, because even if you take it down, it can still be viewed.
Well, even if you've deleted it off of Twitter's service per se, you still have the Wayback Machine to contend with. Yes?
Yeah, there's always a backup
Oh yeah.
in my mind.
The
Yeah.
internet never forgets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So, So in a sense, the RESTful API is using the internet more appropriately for the design of the internet. In addition to using request packets correctly, it also attempts to use HTTP response codes correctly. That is to say, if you are actually trying to access something you don't have permission to access, you get forbidden, right? If the thing you're trying to the thing you're looking for wasn't found, you get a 404. You know, all of these types of things. The values that you are actually retrieving and are being sent back in the response will often be JSON encoded, just because JSON is super useful for transferring data, and it's like standard now, so you know everybody knows what JSON is. Make sense? So we are going to follow through a working example here. We're going to talk about a database of students with student ID numbers, and we are going to talk about an API for performing certain operations on this database. It doesn't really matter what the database contains, you know. We're just talking about APIs. There's a lot of conversation going on in this room. Could we perhaps have less whispering? Or quieter whispering? Thank you. So, this is an example of what your API might look like. So the API itself is a standardized set of, if this is what you put in, this is what I will send you, right? Very, very similar to function calls, right? If these are the arguments you give me, this is what I'm going to give you in return, right? So, in this particular case, we have two entries in our API, both of them GET requests. If we have the URL myAPI student ID accessed, this is a request to retrieve a list of all valid student IDs. On the other hand, if we have an additional slash and an ID number which has been added to our URL, this is a request to retrieve the information for a single student ID. Have you ever looked at a URL and noticed, man, that's a lot of numbers. Did they really have all these folders with all of these numbers? You know, I can, even looking right here at Mr. Canvas, right? Certainly, we are receiving get query, like we're receiving query parameters inside of this URL. But what's the PHP file name? Big string of numbers, right? That ain't no PHP file. What the heck is going on? Right? We're about to learn what the heck is going on.
Is it a course ID?
Hmm?
Is it a course ID?
It's probably just a random ID.
For that particular one, that will, this will be the course ID here.
Yeah.
This one is, I think, probably the file ID number for this document.
It's
So,
like the server ID, probably,
Yeah, so the first
right?
number is
Yeah.
like the course that the system recognizes.
I would go so far as to say, these are probably not folders either.
Oh.
I think that Canvas has been coded poorly. It is my belief that these are actually like key value pairs.
Like an API call.
Yeah, it's like course, this number, file, that number. Right? So this is how a RESTful API works. Rather than encoding your parameters as get queries or as the contents of an encrypted post payload, you are encoding the parameters directly in the URL itself, right? Very often, these will be, you know, random numbers similar to how cookies are random numbers, right? So cracking these, right? Come on in.
I've become one with the rain.
Well, you were already 70% water.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wear your jacket like that,
No, this is how I've been wearing it since I was.
Okay. So,
Seems like it's a canon event.
order.
Sorry.
So, in the same way, when we were talking about cookies, having the cookie itself does not necessarily give you any information about the database that, about like a session database running on your Apache server. It doesn't give you any information necessarily because it's not guessable, right? It's long enough and there are enough possibilities that one could not randomly arrive at, you know, the session ID for some person who's, you know, using Canvas or Twitter or some login system, right? This will be a similar idea. I guarantee you that there are not, how many zeros? I guarantee you there are not 17 million files on this service, right? Probably much less than that. So, I also guarantee you that there are not, you know, nearly 100,000 courses running at this institution, right? So, at any rate, we are going to learn how it is that one reads something like that in PHP and extracts parameters from it. It's actually not too bad. It's a little more complicated than something like maintaining a session, but still very much within the realm of the sorts of things we can expect you to write on the exam. So, number one highly critical point. Hope everybody's paying attention. you will notice that URL does not have a PHP script indicated in it. So how on earth does the server know which PHP script to run? Does anybody already know?
I'm not entirely sure, but it's kind of like how index.html works, like there's a default.
Yeah, so it's already set up in XAMPP to work this way. That's why, so in XAMPP, the existence of this file, and it's a file that does this, sets XAMPP up by default so that the /dashboard folder is the one you open by default if you just log into localhost.
Or
Right.
routing?
What?
Is it routing?
Routing is the principal. What's the name of the file?
Is it web.php? Or?
Nope. We have htdocs and we have htaccess. The name of the file is htaccess. So, any folder on an Apache server which contains the file .htaccess allows you to redirect all incoming URLs for this and any subfolder to a specific PHP file. This specific PHP file can then act as a dispatcher and invoke other PHP scripts depending on, which section of the API you want to execute, right? Which API function is being invoked. Does that make sense? Sort of? A little bit? Any questions? Okay. So let's do it. If everybody could please load up XAMPP. We will You're invalid. There.
Yeah.
I was talking to the computer internet. I wasn't invalidating some of my students.
Some?
Or any.
Venn diagram is formed in my head. Some. What does that imply?
We have fun. Man, that's like the worst thing you can say to someone in 2023. I'm about to invalidate your experience.
That's wildly appropriate.
Oh yes, I'm about to destroy you with facts and logic.
It's because it's not even vulgar. It sounds ominous. If it was an actual insult, at least it's vulgar,
If you have to resort to vulgarity, then you're not, you need to work on your vocabulary or your intonation. Rest. Oh, wait, no, I'm gonna call it the rest. Because this is almost the rest of the course. Ah! I trust myself. Perhaps I shouldn't.
Sir, you tell us to trust no one.
Yes, not even yourself. I mean, if I don't, then it's just gonna, yeah. Okay,
Don't have to explain that.
it's only a sin to lie to humans. There we go. Okay, so, where are we here? We need XAMPP running, blink to blink. It takes too long to set up the database, so I'm probably gonna skip the part where it like does the database stuff and just like,
Go straight.
well, I'm gonna do PHP and just like return like, oh, this is totally I totally got this from a database for real, guy, you know, something like that.
Return a random number.
So, so some people call it index.php. I'm going to call it dispatch because I like the word dispatch. And it's kind of more what we're doing here. Dispatch.php. Bloop, 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 bloop. There we go. So, opening tag. There we go. Now, there we go. All right. So, the first thing that we need to do is we need to identify the incoming request type. Right? So, it's included in server, the server superglobal. I believe it's called request
Request.
type. Request what?
Is it a question?
Method? Yeah, it's probably request method. Let me just double check that though, because, you know, I've been caught on this type of thing before. There we go. Yep, it's request method. Request method in all caps. So the request method is just it tells you whether your request method was get or post or put or delete or it's just that information. So before we get too far, why don't we let's whip up a quick HTML page to be able to send different requests. Now, this document recommends the use of programs like Postman or what's the other one with the eyeball icon? I forget. I actually downloaded that one. Let's see here. What is it again? Insomnia. So services like Postman and Insomnia, you can use these to send HTTP packets to just, you know, fire them off into the internet reasonably easily. It'll formulate the packet correctly and send them off, right? For our purposes, because this is on a local host, I'm just gonna like whip up some quick HTML forms to send the correct packet types. Yeah. There we go. So we need a get request for all students and a get request for some particular student. I'm gonna do this with Ajax. Create. There we go. So, conflict equals get all conflict is get one. There we go. Don't take this. There we go. Split left, right. There we go. Wonderful. So I'm just going to write a couple of Ajax requests to be able to send the requests appropriately. Remember, although these are GET requests, we are not sending our data through query parameters. We're not sending them through the usual GET parameters. We are attempting to encode it in the URL directory structure with between the slashes, right? So we can't just use the default, here's the form data, use the GET method, send her out. We can't just do that this time. We need to be slightly more convoluted about it. So, get all function boom function get one. There we go. So everything's going to be about the URL encoding, right? If we recall our API that we're attempting to create here, right? We are being given the URL which accesses all student records. The colon means argument, right? So if you provide one argument, then you are providing an ID number, and what it will do is retrieve that student's ID number, right? Or this information associated with that student from the ID number. So, have I lost anybody yet? Are you guys following along all right? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, cool. Oh, come on. You were late, you don't count. So, we wish to send our get all to that specific URL because it has no parameters. In our case, the URL will be slightly different than in this example. URL, let's take a look at this again. We get the rest, which is the directory on server, well, actually, we probably don't need to. Let's just configure it this way. My API slash student ID. There we go. Now we send that in a fetch request. Fetch URL. Set method. How do you set method in a fetch request? It's like,
Yeah, the
Method.
method equals,
what?
yeah, the method equals something.
Method equals get. Or is it colon? No? Yeah? Something like that?
I'm seeing method colon.
Then response gets response.json. Then data gets let's just grab a reference to our output window that we haven't created yet. Var output is equal to, let's just make a h3 output and h3 div id equals output div, there we go, boom! Output is equal to document dot query selector output. There we go. In the usual manner for client-side code. Then data output dot inner HTML is equal to the data. Don't even care. Well, I gotta actually, in that case, I should be decoding it as text, even if it's JSON. Basically, I'm just reflecting the JSON that's being sent by the server and like just printing it, you know, because I don't want to do any more client-side code than I have to in a server-side class. So, there we go. There's our URL to get all. Getting one, very similar. Var ID is equal to document dot query selector ID number is input, or ID is input dot value. Oh. Yes. Thank you. I think I'm gonna get in trouble because I don't have curly braces there. So we add the slash and then we add the ID number into the URL. Question?
Do we need the colon? No. Sorry, I'm still looking confused.
Yeah, no, you don't need the colon. For reasons you'll see like once we start getting into it. But do you remember when we were doing databasing, when we used the PDO object to be able to insert data using parameters rather than just using the question marks? In that case, they used the same sort of style for parameter goes here inside of a string. So that's basically what that, except in that case they, I think, enclosed it in curly braces as well. But yeah, that's because you've got the slash separators, it's like assumed that you won't put more than one parameter in one between two slashes, you know. So that's just like, this is the ID number, and that's also, I think, supposed to be the name of the parameter, but it's, you know, basically, using this, you are sending the parameters positionally rather than sending them with like key value pairs anyways, unless you've set it up like this, but there's no reason you have to. You can just send randoms, just like /big number, /big number, /big number, and you can use things positionally to determine, you know what I mean.
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, where were we? Let's see. There we go. So, for the time being, in our dispatch.php script, let's just echo back the whatever the return result of the request method is. So, type is that, echo type, there we go, bing bang boom, test early, test often, localhost, colon, there we go. Okay, there we go. So, having done all this so far, we are not yet to the point where our dispatch script will actually execute if we click one of these. Get object not found, right? Because it believes that the last element of the URL is the file that we are trying to retrieve. We don't have a file called student ID, that's a parameter. So, we have to set up htaccess. So, you can redirect URLs on an Apache web server by putting a file named htaccess inside the folder that you're trying to access. The contents of the htaccess file should activate Apache's rewrite engine to point every request for that folder to a single file. So, this is the contents of the .htaccess file. Rewrite engine on, rewrite rule, dot, and then you specify the name of the PHP script you want everything redirected to. Dot is a wildcard, so this rule says to redirect any URL that enters the My API folder to the file index.php. So dot means send all here. You can use that parameter to send specific requests, specific URLs of certain formats to different PHP files, but for our purposes, this is sufficient. Make sense? So, can anybody tell me why this file starts with a period? It's not entirely a file extension. Any Linux users in the house?
Is it
Can we
hidden?
get a hidden file?
Sorry, what was yours?
Hidden?
Yes. So in Linux-based environments, or Unix-based environments, prepending a file name with the single period character makes it a hidden file. So, any Git users in the crowd? Anybody, any users of git ignore? Yeah, and git ignore does the same thing, doesn't it? Yeah. Git ignore, so first of all, if you're not using Git, you should. And second of all, when you make a repository using Git, you will sometimes wish to exclude certain types of files from inclusion in the repository. So you can specify a git ignore file, which ignores the specified file patterns. And you can use glob patterns for that. Does anybody know what a glob pattern is? Yeah. So when you say like star.txt to select all .txt files, that's a glob pattern. That's like the most common one, but there are many, many other glob patterns. You can have them like iterate through numbers and stuff. It's cool. Yes?
Is it like essentially regex or file formats?
It's kind of similar to regular expressions, but it's not like it's an older and different
What's the
form
idea
of it.
Like it just generalizes.
Yeah, one of the reasons, and actually glob patterns are the reason that like many special characters are not considered valid inside of Unix file names. Like asterisk is not permitted, neither is question mark. Asterisk is the multi-character wildcard character. Question mark is the single character wildcard character in glob patterns. So, and there's a lot of other stuff like that. You can like set up ranges using curly braces and stuff, but it doesn't matter. It's just this class briefly touched Linux, and therefore I must expound the virtues of Linux. I'm sure that's what everybody comes to these lectures for, my digressions on Linux and how it's the superior operating system. So anyway, redirecting URLs is as simple as plopping down your htaccess file inside of the folder you wish to redirect the files in, or you wish to redirect the requests in. So, let's take a look. So, that's no longer good. New file. I'm going to have to see file extensions. .htaccess. No file extension. Did I get it right? Yes. You open that guy up with a basic text editor. You give that file the contents. Rewrite engine on, rewrite rule dot, and then you specify what the PHP script is. In this case, it's not index.php, it's dispatch.php. Save that up. Now, if everything is going according to plan, cross your fingers, folks. There we go. So, we now have a slightly confused situation. We are redirecting everything to that PHP script, but we are redirecting around our index page, right? So we now have to correct our directory structure so that basically we still get our page that we can create the requests from. So let's make a new folder. Call that folder API. Let's put the htaccess in that folder, and let's put dispatch in that folder as well. There we go. Going to have to close it. The mouse is terrible. Ah. There we go. So now, and we should also change our request URLs to reflect this change. So when we access API slash, then we get it. There we go. Save. Now, if we reload the rest, we get our HTML page back. If we access the REST/API, you can see that we're doing that typical Apache server thing where it just gives you what the contents of the folder are, just dispatch.php, and if we send a GET request, we get our output GET. Ta-da! Questions?
I'm in a 404.
Put dispatch. Oh, it says dispatch, not patch. So that might be a problem right there. Check your htaccess. Yep, good. All right. Is dispatch or is HTX? Okay, let me see. Show me a folder again. Move htaccess into API. Dispatch into API. And go back to your JavaScript. Remove my underscore from those files. Should work now. There you go. Yes.
Can you go to the HTML doc for a second?
Sure. There we go. Sorry? I closed it. It's in here. There it is. All right.
We're literally just done something that we're getting from HTML through JSON from Ajax. We're requesting the server to give us back a file. Like, no, not file. How can I see this? How long?
Okay.
In my brain, it's making sense.
That should make a difference.
Okay. I'll do it on the board. I'll do it on the board. But everybody else can probably use a summary as well. So. Oh my God. Who does this? Who did this? I mean, people. All right. People are the worst people. All right. So in summary, these are the operations which we've performed, right? So we have our client. We have our server. Inside of the server, right, we have our /the rest folder. Inside of this, we have index.html, and we have the JavaScript, but it doesn't really count because it's not requestable. /API htaccess, and then dispatch.php. Alright? So, this is what has gone on in that operation. .htaccess writes a rule saying for every request entering this folder, redirect all requests to the specified file. So, all incoming requests, I'm gonna flip my bracket around. All incoming requests must be sent to dispatch.php if they are accessing API or anything that looks like a subfolder, right? So, if the incoming request was API slash this is a bunch of args, right? Everything past this point is no longer being used to look up folders, right? These used to be always folders, right? But now, they are no longer folders, they are just encoded information, and we can use them in different ways. Yes?
Does it ignore file extensions as well?
Yes, yeah, it ignores, well, like, the mechanism was agnostic of file extensions to begin with, right? Like, if you wanted to access a PNG file, you know, you would say API slash, you know, image.png, and then it would load it from the server using the request, right? So, yeah, it doesn't care about file extensions, and it didn't used to. Question?
Wouldn't you better describe that as like, it's just another programming language for addressing? Like, that's essentially what you're describing there. So like the API is, after you've hit the routing system, it's no longer talking about files, it's talking just in variables,
Correct.
right?
Yes, absolutely. Once you've hit htaccess, the rest of these are parameters. They are no longer referring to folders, right? And this is a very important point to get, because if you still think these are folders, you're going to be making all kinds of folders here, and you shouldn't. All right. So, how the flow was working with this example that we had, right? Our client accessed the index file in the folder the rest, retrieves it. I now have index.html, right? Index.html then sends one of two different packets to this guy, right? It's sending either API slash student ID or API slash student ID slash, 00123, right? Some number that we entered. These are collected up by htaccess, and they are all routed to dispatch.php, right? Because we don't have a student underscore ID folder here. And even if we did, these requests would still be routed here instead of to that folder. It overrides the usual behavior. Does that make sense? Everybody cool? Everybody on the same page? Thumbs up? Okay. So now that we've established that this actually bloody works, we can do some more interesting things with it. So we have set things up now so that our URL itself can encode parameters rather than sending those through get query parameters, right? There we go. So the thing we now need to do, both of our incoming request types are get in this case. So I'm gonna write a little bit of if statement trickery because this is supposed to be a dispatch script, right? But you don't have to, in this case it's overkill, but I'm gonna do the overkill.
I think my brain already does it.
That's okay. So let's switch on the type. Case, get, great. Default, echo, unacceptable packet type. There. So we switch on our packet request type. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to get a string representation of our URL so that we can work with it. Because that's where our parameters are. We are no longer getting our information through the superglobals, even though this is a GET request. So, they technically call these URIs, not URLs in this case. But so it goes. So, what we're looking for is another server variable. Server request URI. For the time being, let's just echo that back to the user just to make sure everything's working. There we go. Ajax? Yeah. So something slightly interesting has happened.
Go back to the
Our output here, right? The URI which the server has received includes the folder that we're in. Right? So, it's actually had a bit added to the beginning versus what we sent from the fetch request. Yes?
Can you show your htaccess file again?
The htaccess? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. That's it? Is that good?
Yep.
There we go.
Remind me what HTX is supposed to.
So So the htaccess file, if it exists in the folder, redirects all incoming requests to that folder to the specified PHP file, regardless as to like how many folders you seem to be accessing.
Okay, that was the missing piece when I was trying to explain what was going on.
There you go. So, good.
Then like have a file that redirects to like a couple different scripts? Or is that impossible?
Yes, it is, because it is possible. This guy right here, this is like a catch-all wildcard. So you could have different rules to redirect things of different forms to different PHP files. Absolutely. I don't know how to write those though. You'll have to look them up.
I'm trying to explore why we would use three right place, like
Yeah. So if I send, you can see if I'm sending a response, like if I'm sending a student number as well, that's also getting encoded inside of the URI, right? So we have this as a string. This is where our parameters are. So we just need to break it apart, pick out the stuff that's useful. All right? So
The htaccess file just goes in the root of your project?
sorry?
The htaccess file just goes in the root of your, like where your index HTML is?
So in our case, we put it inside the API folder.
Okay.
If you put it in the folder with the index page, it will redirect requests around that index page and send it to a PHP script instead. So it should go inside the API folder and not the folder above.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I have it there, it's just not working for me, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
No. You also have it not working?
Yeah.
Well, let me take a quick look. Show me your directory.
Yeah, just got a full REST API, and
Okay, show me how you're accessing the page.
it just is localhost class, then API, and this index.
In class, REST API, send get request. Oh, what about your JavaScript? Interesting. Oh. Well, you're not actually echoing anything. Put it inside. Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's not saying anything. because it's not saying anything. Almost got it working.
Yeah, students did mine too, so I might be missing something somewhere. That's fine.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a client side problem. Show me your HTML. Value max?
Always one of those, man. You miss one line of code and it's like, what the hell?
There we go. Give me a moment. So, I think the problem that you have is that you have two copies of dispatch. One here, one there, right? The one that you've been making all the modification to is not the one inside the API folder that everything keeps redirecting to. So, yeah, that won't help. Nice. Perfect. Very good. So you were number 2 then? Nice.
No, I haven't.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
number,
Yeah,
I've
something.
been outdone twice.
So I just copied these modifications on the dispatch.
Yep, and then just reload and then hit send. Syntax error. Hello? Oh, change these to text. Yeah. JText is on. Progress. I gotta keep going. So now that we have our path URL or URI, we must break it into chunks in order to extract the individual parameters from it. This is a string manipulation operation. In Python, this was split. Does anybody remember what the function for this in PHP is? We have used this before.
Parse? Is it parse?
It's not parse. It has a very dramatic name.
Oh, explode?
It's explode! Boom! So, params is equal to explode on the slash our path.
You need to do 2
Now-
slashes.
Oh, what did I do?
It's 2 slash, double slash.
Oh, it's the backslash.
Oh! Wait, I'm using the wrong, that's the slash. Alright.
Not the slash.
Captain?
Yeah, going that
To the
way.
skate park.
Yeah, the other way. You said it's an
That's the vibe today.
So-
So,
This is useful to know, alright? If you explode the path, you get all of the components. You can see a couple of these are useful and now can be extracted. However, we have a lot of junk data at the beginning. So it would be useful to be able to remove everything that isn't a parameter. This means knowing the path and removing it. So there are a number of ways to do this, but a lot of the ways I've seen to do it involve a call to substring. Let me just look up the documentation for substring. You see how much I look up the documentation in class? You guys should also look up the documentation in class.
We're all expected to memorize this for our exams, though.
Precisely. Returns the progression of a string specified by offset and length. So, it's sub str. First parameter is the string to be substringed. Offset is the the starting point, and then the length is what we want. Like that's the finishing point. Let's see here. If length is omitted or null, the substring starting from offset until the end of the string. So we don't want to include length because we want to go to the end. Now, the starting point, we need to know what the starting point is. So a quick and dirty way of doing that is just encoding everything that goes before it as a variable and counting the valid number in that, in case the URL changes, right?
Sir, it's the online, that's the string.
Oh, yeah. Right, thank you. Yeah. A C programmer should not have forgotten that. All right. Now let's see what our thing returns, our big long script. Ooh, look at that. Student ID, this number. Right? Now we can do something like am I putting a switch inside of a switch? Oh. Switch count params. Case 1. Yes. Break. Case 2. Break. Default. Incorrect. Default is echo incorrect parameters. You fool. I've decided that this switch case is ornery because it's inside of another switch case. So, in the case where we have one parameter, this is get requesting all student info. This is get requesting one student's info. If we just set up, some quick little data structure, data is equal to array of associative arrays, number 1, 2, 3, 4, yield, number is 1, 2, 3, 4, name is George. Two, three, four, five. Name is Martha. Number 3, 4, 5, 6 is Eve the cat. There we go. Quick and dirty. Then we can do a simple little loop. Requesting all student info is just echo JSON, well, it's actually, echo JSON encode data. And requesting one student's info for int I is equal to 0, I is less than. This is the part where you'd be doing a database access. Less than count data, but I'm lazy. / I have 10 minutes left in class. I know I forgot the bloody.
Why are you doing that?
Yes. Why am I doing what?
You don't need to declare a type.
Because I need to search for the number matching these.
Okay.
Right?
I was gonna suggest getting one as random.
Well, see, we're requesting a particular one, right?
Yeah.
So if flag is equal to true, false, there we go. If params at 1 are is equal to data at I at number, then echo JSON encode data at I, and flag is equal to true. And if you get through that, all that, and the flag is still false, if not flag, that's not, no, not, there is not. If not flag, echo student doesn't exist. They are a ghost. Spooky. There we go. What are you complaining about? There we go. Semicolon. Gets me every time. Alright. So, quick little piece of code. Traces through the data structure, extracting the student that is being requested. So, let's take a look and see if this works. Save. So now, if we send request all students, we get all students. If we request 2, 3, 4, 5, we get that particular student. And if we send an invalid request, student doesn't exist. Right? Make sense? So, again, these cases are where you would either invoke a function in another PHP script that you've imported, or you perform a database access of some kind. Here, I'm just looking things up in an array of associative arrays, which I've hard-coded into the PHP file. Obviously, this is not the way that real politics is done. So, you would use a real database using real data SQL queries, similar to the stuff we did in preceding weeks. Right? Yeah. Does this make sense? Okay. You'll notice that you can handle other types of requests using this structure. All you have to do is drop in a case for a post request, right? Or drop in a case for a, a put request or a delete request, right?
Sir, would that be better to leave it for a different PHP script handle?
Okay, so no, actually. This is the part, of all of the stuff in here, this is the part that has to be in this file, right? Because the purpose of this PHP file is to dispatch requests, right? It's receiving all requests, right? So it's routing all of the incoming request types and then firing the information off to the appropriate PHP functions, which it will load hopefully dynamically, so it doesn't have to load the whole damn library all at once. Yes.
I was gonna say, wouldn't it make more sense to, rather than check with post, put whatever, not to pass it on to like the following thing to actually handle that specific thing if need be? Like say for example, this handle, like, say for example you have a whole system of users, administrators, something like that, and you want to access like user, then that would send what promoted is and the information to that specific PHP file.
Yeah, well, like if you want to do user validation and that type of thing, that's a layer on top of this as well,
Yeah.
right? This inner code, which constitutes the actual routing of the API, right? That would only come after you had validated the user. Another thing that we are not doing, right? We are not in any way protecting against XSS attacks, right? In here, before you actually use parameters to do anything, like right up here, you should do something like, how much time do I have? Yeah, I can do this. I can do it. For I is equal to 0, I is less than count grams. I plus plus. Oh, I hate you, PHP. There we go. Params at I is equal to filter bar params at I, right? Or, some of these are supposed to be strings, some of these are supposed to be integers. If you know the structure, you can do more specific matching based on the cases that exist in here. But if all you want to do is remove XSS attacks, you can use filter, sanitize, special chars, even on ints. It's general enough to catch XSS attacks, but it won't validate if it's an integer. So this doesn't actually at any point require the student number to be an integer though. Like, you could literally just have like poop in the array, and if you give it poop, it will match poop, and then poop will be returned. So, yeah. So you would want to drop that step in because what do we never do with anything coming from the user?
Trust it?
We never trust the user. We never trust the client. Even if it's just like a random serial number. Never trust anything. Be suspicious. Be paranoid. Paranoia is an asset in data security. Alright? Any questions? Well, that's class. Thank you very much for your time and attention today, folks. I hope you all learned something useful. I will hang around for a little bit to clean up some remaining questions, and but I do have a thing to get to, so I won't take too long. Yes?